I felt like when we was right there, where we was one of the most dominant teams in football, a change was made that wasn't necessary, and it cost us, in the end. We never won a championship, even though it seemed like we was right on the brink of winning one or two.
Do you think you would have won if both of them stuck around? Really?
Yeah, we would have won. Yeah.
Just when you thought the Chargers season couldn't get any worse, well, of course it did today.
After the 2005 season, the Chargers let Drew Brees walk and decided to roll with the promising yet inexperienced Philip Rivers. And you know the rest. Brees signs with the Saints, they win a Super Bowl years later, while Rivers fails to ever reach one. They both become top-tier quarterbacks, but for Chargers fans, to see their former quarterback when he hoisted that trophy must have been heart-wrenching. For this scenario, we are going to skew the thoughts of the Chargers front office. To go with a guy who just suffered an injury to his throwing shoulder is ballsy, but Drew Brees' personality, in a sense, has that never-give-up toughness, something this time around will catch the eye of the front office. Before we start this what if, let's go over a few things. Originally, this 06 Chargers team was loaded. 11 Pro Bowlers all around, which was the most of any team that season. Just to break it down a bit, they had a nasty rush defense, including Pro Bowl defensive tackle Jamal Williams and Rookie of the Year Sean Merriman. On the offensive side, probably the best offensive line in the league at the time, which included 2 Pro Bowlers. They also had, in my opinion, the best running back in football at the time in LT, and one of the best fullbacks in the game in Lorenzo Neal. And then lastly, don't forget about the rising star tight end Antonio Gates. With all this talent, I hope you see why this team went 14-2. You know who this offense actually reminds me of? Today's Dallas Cowboys. A dominant offensive line, the league leading rusher who's very versatile, and a young quarterback who just took over for the injured guy. The difference between these two teams is San Diego has a much better defense. And also, because of the inexperience of Philip Rivers, the 06 Chargers were heavily dependent on the run, hence why LT set the rushing touchdown record. Rivers did become a great quarterback over his career, like I said, but those first few seasons, he was mostly a game manager. But anyways, we're going to get into the main point of this video. Now we are going to jump into our what if. Even though team management feels pressure to go with Rivers, they go bold and re-sign Brees. Quick note, because of this move, the Saints will now be pursuing the next best available quarterback.
With the second choice in the 2006 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Vince Young, quarterback, University of Texas.
So for this Chargers team, replace an inexperienced Philip Rivers with a pissed off Drew Brees. With questions rising of whether or not he can be a great quarterback in this league, the man comes back with vengeance. I truly believe this would have been one of the greatest single seasons by a team in NFL history. In 2006, they will finish first in the AFC, ascending as the clear favorite to win it all. LT will still have one of the greatest single seasons of all time and win MVP, and with a trusted Drew Brees having his best year yet, they will have a much more balanced attack. Quick note, this will make them much more lethal come playoff time. To look at the Saints for a second, Vince Young doesn't put up great stats, but his late game heroics are just enough to make the Pro Bowl, and for the Saints to make the playoffs, already seeming like the answer New Orleans was looking for. Going back to the original 06 Chargers, when they played New England in the playoffs, overall they dominated that game. They held that offense in check, and Brady threw 3 interceptions. The problem was Rivers struggled. He only completed 43% of his passes and threw no touchdowns and 1 interception. Going back to our scenario, like I said, with a much more balanced attack, this offense is just more equipped to handle New England in the playoffs. Their defense dominates once again, and Drew Brees and company dissect their defense en route to a victory. Moving on to the AFC Championship, it was originally New England losing on the road to Indianapolis. This time, we are in San Diego because of home field advantage. The Colts are coming off a string of road losses, losing their final 4 regular season away games, which was actually all their losses up to that point. With the Colts' below average defense, the Chargers would have a field day, and with the advantage of a more well-rounded team, I think the Chargers handled their business and punched their ticket to the Super Bowl. So here is the moment all Chargers fans were robbed of. Super Bowl 41, the Chargers versus the Bears. The Chargers just went through Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Now they gotta go through Rex Grossman. Rex freaking Grossman. Let's be real here. Drew Brees brings home the trophy and becomes a hero to San Diego fans everywhere, forever cementing his legacy. Back to reality for a second, the original 06 Chargers lost in the playoffs, and with tension between the GM and their coach, Schottenheimer was then fired. In our scenario, Schottenheimer doesn't get fired. At least, not yet. Let's jump back into our scenario. So as we approach the draft, we know that originally the Chargers wanted a wide receiver, which they used their first pick, number 30, on Craig Davis. And he never amounted to much. He only played 3 seasons in the league. In our scenario, the Chargers have a bit to work with. They still have Philip Rivers on the roster. And now that Drew Brees is definitely their guy moving forward, they can safely trade him away. The 2 most desperate teams for a quarterback at the time were the Raiders and the Browns. The Raiders were going to take Jamarcus Russell, so they're not going to make a trade. But the Browns, on the other hand, had the 22nd pick, and they had their mind set on a quarterback. The Chargers offer Rivers for the pick, and the Browns accept. With the 22nd pick, the Chargers select Dwayne Bowe, a solid vertical threat and complements his offense very nicely. With the Chargers' next selection, pick number 32, they will select Eric Weddle. Both Dwayne Bowe and Eric Weddle will eventually become Pro Bowlers. Onto the 07-08 season, Philip Rivers is already a hero as they find their way into the playoffs. This might sound ridiculous, but here's why it's possible. In 2007, they originally went 10-6 with Derek Anderson at quarterback, a journeyman player who never amounted to more than a few average seasons. Now improved with Philip Rivers, they win one more game and sneak into the wild card, ultimately losing that game. Also in New Orleans, things are falling apart. Vince Young isn't everything they hoped he'd be, as he has a second-year slump, as the Saints fail to make the playoffs. Other than that, I'm not going to change much here. History repeats itself with the Giants upsetting the Patriots. Moving on to the 08-09 season, many members of the coaching staff will leave for other jobs. This happens often when a team performs as well as the Chargers did. And with a new staff being put into place, the 08 Chargers will struggle to be relevant. And after a disappointing 08 season, Schottenheimer and the GM will get into their final argument and he'll be fired. This is just like in real life, but just a year later than normal. It wasn't about his coaching ability, it was more about how much they got along, which honestly is ridiculous. But anyways, offensive coordinator Norv Turner is now promoted to head coach, which works out great because he's been working with Drew Brees for all these years. 2009, the bounce back year. Norv Turner has his offense rolling, and new defensive coordinator Ron Rivera will revitalize this defense. The Chargers finish as the 2nd seed, and they find themselves in another AFC championship versus the Indianapolis Colts. Originally that season, the Colts went on to the Super Bowl, but lost to Drew Brees in a Saints uniform. Other than the uniform change, it doesn't change here. Drew Brees still has their number, and the Chargers head to their 2nd Super Bowl appearance in 4 years. Peyton Manning sadly is still in search of his first Super Bowl appearance. Now questions rise about Peyton Manning being able to be a clutch performer in the playoffs, as he still doesn't have a Super Bowl appearance. So guess who the Chargers will face off against? Brett Favre and the Minnesota Vikings. This would have been one for the ages. Hall of Fame duos. Both quarterbacks have 1 Super Bowl victory. Honestly, I just get excited thinking about this game. This could have been one of the most exciting Super Bowls of all time. Now, this is a hard matchup just to decide who won. For this game, I decided to look at the 09 Saints versus the 09 Chargers side by side. Originally, the 09 Saints eked out a victory in overtime versus the Vikings in the NFC Championship. So, after breaking down each defense and an estimated efficiency of each offense, when you factor in some of the team rankings and how the Chargers improved with having Brees over Rivers and also drafting wide receiver Dwayne Bowe, I give the Chargers and Drew Brees the nod over Minnesota. And they bring their 2nd Super Bowl home to San Diego in 4 years. Now, this will be the highlight of this video. The rest of the seasons will be summarized. To bring out some of the other players and teams mentioned in this video, Philip Rivers will show flashes of greatness, but will fail to make the playoffs after that first season in Cleveland. This was mostly due to the unstable coaching staff and front office, and a lack of bringing talent around him. He'll muster up some great statistical seasons, and even make a few Pro Bowls, but just not a lot of team success. Vince Young will never amount to much, ultimately becoming a bust, and the Saints will never reach the Super Bowl. After the Chargers found the promised land twice, they will slowly fall to a state they are in today. After the Chargers' 2nd Super Bowl, they will slowly fall to a similar state they're in today. Drew Brees will dominate statistically as always, but they will lose players here and there and never manage to replace key players. They will be a hit-and-miss playoff team for the rest of his career, and he will never reach another Super Bowl. But those 2 Super Bowls will forever cement a Hall of Fame career that I'm sure Chargers fans would have never forgotten.